I stood there in shock as my daughter sobbed, her BLM shirt torn after the HOA president struck her with a clipboard, never imagining this peaceful suburb would become our battleground. How was I supposed to know that standing up to Mrs. Reynolds would trigger a neighborhood conspiracy that even my husband's position as police commissioner couldn't protect us from? I still remember the exact moment our peaceful life in Maplewood Gardens fell apart. My daughter, Zoe, burst through our front door, face streaked with tears, clutching her arm where the sleeve of her Black Lives Matter t-shirt hung in tatters. "Mom," she cried, running into my arms. I dropped the dinner plates I was setting out, barely hearing them clatter on the table as I rushed to her. "Baby, what happened? Who did this to you?" I asked, my heart pounding as I examined her arm. A red mark was forming just above her elbow. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Zoe could barely catch her breath between sobs. Mrs. Reynolds from the HOA stopped me at the playground. She said I was breaking rules by wearing this shirt. When I tried to walk away, she grabbed my arm and hit me with her clipboard. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Zoe was only 14, a straight-A student who had never been in trouble. The shirt had been a birthday gift from her uncle, my brother, who worked as a civil rights attorney in the city. "She said kids aren't allowed to spread propaganda in common areas," Zoe continued, her voice shaking. "She took pictures of me and said they'd be sending us a formal warning." I helped her clean up and called my husband, Marcus, right away. As police commissioner for our county, he dealt with difficult people all the time. But this was different. This was our daughter. "She did what?" Marcus's voice boomed through the phone. "I'm coming home right now." That night we sat with Zoe at the kitchen table, our dinner growing cold as she recounted every detail. How Mrs. Reynolds had been watching her from the moment she entered the park. How 2 other HOA committee members stood nearby nodding as Mrs. Reynolds lectured her about community standards and keeping politics out of family spaces. "Did anyone else see this happen?" Marcus asked, his police training kicking in as he took notes. Zoe nodded. Mr. Finley was walking his dog. He looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. And those new neighbors from down the street, their kids were on the swings. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. "We'll handle this, sunshine. Nobody gets to put hands on my daughter." The warning notice arrived at 7:30 the next morning, tucked into our mailbox in an official HOA envelope. I stood in my bathrobe on our perfect lawn, reading words that made my blood boil. Violation, political messaging in common areas. Resident Zoe Williams observed wearing provocative apparel in Maplewood Gardens Park on June 3rd at 4:15 p.m. First warning, subsequent violations subject to fines starting at $250. At the bottom, Mrs. Jennifer Reynolds had signed her name with a flourish, adding HOA President underneath in bold letters. I marched inside and slapped the notice on our kitchen island. "They're formalizing harassment now," I told Marcus as he poured his coffee. "When did a statement like Black Lives Matter become against the rules?" Marcus picked up the paper, his jaw tightening as he read. "It's not in any bylaw I've ever signed. Let me make some calls." After he left for work, I decided to walk the neighborhood, something I'd done nearly every morning since moving here 3 years ago. Usually, Mrs. Henderson would wave from her garden, and the Jacksons would invite me for coffee on their porch. But today was different. Mrs. Henderson suddenly became very interested in her roses. When I passed the Jacksons, curtains twitched, but their door remained closed. Near the community mailboxes, a group of 3 women I recognized from the summer barbecue fell silent as I approached. "Good morning," I offered with a smile. They mumbled replies, avoiding eye contact before hurrying away. When I returned home, our pristine mailbox had been splattered with raw eggs, the yellow mess dripping onto our freshly mulched flower bed. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just about Mrs. Reynolds. Something bigger was happening. I spent the afternoon reading through every HOA document we'd received since moving in. Nowhere did it mention restrictions on clothing or expression. I called my brother for legal advice, and he promised to look into it. Marcus came home late, his face drawn with worry. "They've been busy," he said, loosening his tie. "I had the mayor himself call me today, asking if we were having issues with the neighborhood association. Apparently, Mrs. Reynolds' husband plays golf with him every Sunday." I showed him the cleaned mailbox and told him about the neighbors' cold shoulders. "Let them try to intimidate us," he said, pulling me close. "They picked the wrong family." We decided Zoe should stay home from the park for a few days, just until things cooled down. But that evening, as I took out the trash, I found a folded note tucked under our doormat. "Control your daughter, or the HOA will. Maplewood has standards. Some residents don't belong here." I stood frozen on our front porch, the paper trembling in my hand as darkness fell around our once welcoming home. What exactly were these people capable of doing to my family? 5 days after the incident, an official notice appeared on every doorstep in Maplewood Gardens. "Emergency HOA meeting. Thursday 7 p.m. attendance mandatory." "They're making their move," Marcus said, reading the bright orange paper over breakfast. "Better to face them directly than wonder what they're plotting." Thursday evening arrived with storm clouds gathering overhead, matching my mood perfectly. I straightened my blazer before entering the community center, determined to show strength. Marcus had been called to an unexpected budget meeting at the station, convenient timing that didn't feel like coincidence. The room buzzed with whispers that died down as I walked in. Nearly all 87 homes in Maplewood Gardens were represented, leaving only a few empty chairs. I spotted one near the back and made my way there, feeling eyes tracking my movement. At exactly 7 p.m., Mrs. Reynolds stepped to the podium, her grey suit pressed to perfection, pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she called the meeting to order. "Neighbors, friends, fellow homeowners," she began, her voice ringing with authority. "We're facing troubled times in our beloved community. Some residents have chosen to ignore our shared values and standards." My cheeks burned as several heads turned toward me. "Political divisions are tearing apart neighborhoods across America," Mrs. Reynolds continued. "We created Maplewood Gardens as a sanctuary from such conflicts, a place where children can play without being dragged into adult disagreements." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Unfortunately," she said, lowering her voice dramatically, "we have residents who insist on bringing division into our peaceful streets." I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Are you referring to my 14-year-old daughter wearing a T-shirt that says Black Lives Matter?" The room fell silent. "A shirt she was wearing when you physically grabbed her arm and hit her with your clipboard?" I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Because that's not division. That's assault on a minor." Mrs. Reynolds' smile tightened. "Mrs. Williams, we all understand you're upset, but your daughter's political statements are creating tension in our community, and your husband's threats to leverage his position against this association were most inappropriate." "What threats?" I demanded. "My husband simply asked about the rule you're claiming she broke, a rule none of us can find in any HOA document we signed." Mr. Dawson, who lived 3 doors down from us, jumped to his feet. "My kids shouldn't have to see protest messages when they're trying to play. Your family is turning our park into some kind of rally ground." Others joined in, voices overlapping. "We moved here to escape all that noise. There are proper channels for political expression. Nobody wants to see that here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing from people who had welcomed us with casseroles when we first moved in. Mrs. Reynolds tapped her microphone. "Order, please. This illustrates exactly the problem we're facing. The board has prepared an amendment to our bylaws to clarify standards for common areas." She nodded to Mr. Peterson, the HOA secretary, who distributed papers throughout the room. My hands shook as I read the proposed amendment. No clothing, signs, flags, or other displays containing political, social justice, or controversial messaging allowed in Maplewood Gardens common areas, including parks, walkways, and the community center. The definition of controversial was worded so broadly it could include almost anything they decided to target. "This is blatant discrimination," I said, standing again. "You're creating a rule after the fact to justify harassing my daughter." Mrs. Reynolds spoke over me. "We'll be voting on this amendment tonight. As our bylaws state, a 2/3 majority is required for passage." I looked around desperately for allies, finding only a few uncomfortable gazes that wouldn't meet mine. "You can't do this!" I insisted. "It violates First Amendment rights." "Actually, Mrs. Williams," Mrs. Reynolds replied with chilling calmness, "private communities have considerable latitude in establishing standards. Your brother, the lawyer, should be able to explain that to you." My breath caught. How did she know about my brother? "Furthermore," she continued, "we've received complaints about unauthorized gatherings at your home last weekend." She was referring to my daughter's study group, 4 teenagers reviewing for finals over pizza. "The noise ordinance," she began, "was not violated." I cut in. 4 kids studying quietly indoors is not a noise violation." Mrs. Reynolds shrugged. "Several neighbors reported excessive noise and parking issues. The board has decided to implement a 3-strike policy for all violations. Your family currently has 2 strikes. A 3rd would trigger fine proceedings and possible expulsion actions." The room spun around me. "Expulsion? You can't evict people from homes they own." "We can certainly make continuing to live here very difficult," she replied, not bothering to hide her threat. "Even for families with connections." As the meeting broke up after the amendment passed 59-6, Mrs. Reynolds caught my arm at the door, her red nails digging into my skin. "Your family has 2 weeks to demonstrate full compliance with all regulations," she whispered. "Even your husband's badge can't stop private property rules. I suggest you start looking for somewhere more suitable for your lifestyle." I pulled away and hurried to my car in the rain, my mind racing. As I turned onto our street, headlights illuminated a shocking sight. Our front yard was scattered with trash, paper cups, and fast food wrappers strewn across the lawn. Someone had spray-painted a single word across our garage door in dripping red letters: "Comply." Hands trembling, I pulled into the driveway and called Marcus. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, panic rising in my throat. When I finally reached him, his voice sounded strained. "I can't talk right now. The chief has me in his office with someone from Internal Affairs." "What? Why?" I asked, watching rain wash streaks of red paint down our garage door. "Someone filed an ethics complaint claiming I threatened to use department resources against private citizens," he said quietly. "I've been ordered to recuse myself from anything involving the HOA or risk suspension." I sat in my darkened car, watching our defaced home through the rain-streaked windshield. These people had systematically isolated us, targeted our daughter, vandalized our property, and now threatened my husband's career, all in less than a week. Who were we really dealing with, and how far would they go to drive us out? I found Mrs. Reynolds's clipboard on our porch this morning with a sticky note: "Final warning." Inside was a photo of Zoe at school, circled in red marker. My hands shook so hard I dropped it. Nobody threatens my child. I spent the whole night reading every word of our HOA rules. Not one line about political shirts or messages. Not one. Their so-called rule was made up just for us. I printed everything, highlighting the parts that proved they were lying. We need help, I told Marcus, showing him the threatening photo of our daughter. His face turned hard as stone. Call Jamar Washington, he said. Best civil rights lawyer in the state. She'll take our case. Jamar agreed to meet us that same day. This is harassment, pure and simple, she said, reviewing our evidence. And that photo of your daughter? That crosses into stalking territory. I felt stronger with Jamar on our side, strong enough to do something that would make Mrs. Reynolds furious. I ordered matching BLM shirts for our whole family, even one for our dog, Rocky. Sunday afternoon, we all walked through the neighborhood park wearing our shirts. Zoe smiled for the first time in days, holding her dad's hand. I noticed Mrs. Reynolds and her HOA friends following us, taking pictures, writing in their little notebooks. One neighbor, Mr. Foster, quickly turned away when I waved. They're building a case against us, Marcus whispered. But so are we. I snapped photos of them following us, evidence for Jamar. When we got home, our key wouldn't work in the front door. Marcus tried his, same problem. They had changed our locks while we were out. Marcus called a locksmith, who arrived an hour later looking nervous. Sorry, folks, I can't help you, he said after making a call. HOA says you're in violation of community rules. They've put a hold on any services to this address. We had to break into our own home through a back window. I turned on the kitchen faucet. Nothing came out. Our water was shut off. A paper notice stuck to our fridge read, "Emergency maintenance issue. We'll resume service when community standards are met." Marcus called the water company, but they said the HOA had authority over the local lines. Next, our internet went dead. Then the electricity flickered all night long. They're trying to make life unbearable, I said as we sat in the dark during yet another accidental power outage. Marcus's phone rang. It was his boss, Chief Wilson. I need you in my office first thing tomorrow. There's been a complaint about abuse of power. What complaint? Marcus asked, his voice tight. Something about threatening to use police resources against private citizens. It's serious, Marcus. That night, neither of us slept. I kept thinking about the neighbors who wouldn't meet our eyes anymore, about Zoe asking if we needed to move, about the strange cars that kept driving by our house, slowing down to take pictures. The next day, I had to pick up groceries while Marcus went to his meeting with Chief Wilson. As I pulled into our driveway, loaded with bags, 6 cars suddenly blocked me in. Mrs. Reynolds stepped out of the first car, followed by the entire HOA board. "We've had enough of your disruptive behavior," she announced loudly, making sure the neighbors could hear her. Perfect grey hair didn't move in the wind, and her expensive shoes clicked on our driveway as she walked toward me with a thick envelope. "What is this?" I asked, feeling my heart pound. "Emergency removal proceedings," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The board voted unanimously this morning. You and your troublemaking family have 72 hours to leave Maplewood Gardens." "You can't do that," I said, standing taller. "This is our home. We have rights." Mrs. Reynolds laughed like I'd told a joke at a dinner party. "Oh, honey, we just changed the bylaws. Special emergency meeting. Everything we're doing is perfectly legal now." I noticed curtains moving in windows across the street. Neighbors were watching, but no one came to help. Some were recording with their phones. "My husband will fight this," I said, trying to sound brave. Mrs. Reynolds leaned in close. "Your husband is fighting for his job right now. Such a shame his career has to end like this. 20 years of service thrown away because his wife and daughter couldn't follow simple rules." I stared at her perfect makeup, hiding her snake smile. How did she know about Marcus's meeting? How much power did these people really have? She dropped the envelope at my feet. 72 hours. Then we bring in the movers ourselves. As they drove away, I picked up the envelope with trembling hands. Could they really take our home? And what happened to Marcus at that meeting? Loud banging on our front door jolted me awake at 6 a.m. "They're here early." I whispered to Marcus, my stomach in knots. Today was eviction day. Marcus peeked through the blinds and broke into a huge smile. It's not them. Come look. I rushed to the window and gasped. News vans, at least 5 of them, with reporters setting up cameras on our lawn. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamar. Check your email right now. Don't talk to anyone until I get there. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands. Jamar had sent a video attachment with the message. It worked. I clicked play and saw Mrs. Reynolds, filmed secretly during our driveway confrontation. We'll get them out like we did the Gonzalez family and those Nigerian doctors. Her voice rang clear. Property values drop when those people move in. Once they're gone, we can have Tyler's development company buy the houses cheap. Oh my God, I breathed. You were recording her? Marcus nodded. Police Training 101. Always gather evidence. My phone exploded with notifications. The video had gone viral overnight. So had our doorbell camera footage showing HOA board members sneaking onto our property to shut off utilities and spray paint our garage. There's more, Marcus said, showing me his phone. Remember my meeting with Chief Wilson? I brought proof that Reynolds' brother-in-law works for the mayor's office. They've been pressuring the department to ignore HOA complaints for years. A car horn beeped outside. Jamar had arrived, carrying a stack of legal folders and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. We have them cornered, she announced, spreading documents across our kitchen table. I filed emergency injunctions against their eviction threat. The judge was furious when she saw the evidence. Marcus's phone rang. He answered, his face serious at first, then breaking into a smile. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. He hung up and hugged me tight. That was the mayor himself. He's launching a full investigation into the HOA, and my job is safe. Chief Wilson has been suspended pending investigation for his role in this mess. I heard more cars arriving outside. Peeking out, I saw something that made me cry. People were gathering on our lawn, dozens of them. Some faces I recognized from nearby neighborhoods, all wearing BLM shirts. Some carried signs. HOAs cannot override civil rights and stand with the Millers. Time to face them, Jamar said, handing me a folder. Here's the temporary restraining order against Reynolds and the entire board. They can't come within 500 feet of your family. As we stepped outside, cameras turned our way. Supporters cheered. I spotted a few of our direct neighbors watching from their windows, shamefaced and hiding behind curtains. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Mrs. Reynolds jumped out, waving papers wildly. 2 board members followed, looking much less confident than before. This changes nothing, she shouted, marching toward our house. We have legally binding. She froze when she saw the cameras, the crowd, the reporters rushing toward her with microphones extended. Marcus stepped forward, standing tall in his full police uniform. Jennifer Reynolds, he announced clearly. The district attorney is investigating you for assault of a minor, conspiracy to violate civil rights, illegal property schemes, and falsifying HOA documents. You can't prove anything, she hissed, but her perfect mask was cracking. Her face had gone pale. Actually, we can, I said, holding up my phone. Your threats are all recorded, so are your late-night visits to damage our property. The HOA has authority over. Not above the law, I finished. The crowd behind us cheered. Mrs. Reynolds' lawyer whispered something in her ear. Her face fell as she looked at the paper he showed her. A young reporter pushed forward. Mrs. Reynolds, is it true your brother-in-law in the mayor's office helped you target families of color in Maplewood Gardens? Another called out, can you comment on the shell company that purchased the Gonzalez family home after they were forced out by HOA violations? Mrs. Reynolds backed toward her car, suddenly looking very small and very old. No comment, she mumbled. By noon, our phone wouldn't stop ringing. 3 more families came forward with stories of HOA harassment. City inspectors arrived to restore our utilities. The mayor's office issued a formal apology. That evening, as news crews finally left our yard, there was a timid knock at our door. It was our neighbour, Mr. Foster, looking at his shoes. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking. "They threatened to find violations on my house if I didn't vote with them. I was scared of losing my home." He wasn't the only one. Throughout the evening, neighbours came by with food, apologies, and stories of how Mrs. Reynolds had bullied them into silence. "Did you know she's bought 6 houses in the neighbourhood through her company?" Mrs. Patel from down the street told us. Always after families were forced out by violations. The next morning, I woke to Zoe bouncing on our bed, waving her tablet. "Mom, Dad, we're trending!" The headline read, "Maplewood Gardens Scandal. HOA President and Board facing criminal charges in housing discrimination scheme." A second article detailed how Mrs. Reynolds and select board members had been using HOA rules to drive out families who didn't fit their neighbourhood vision, then purchasing their homes at reduced prices through a hidden company. They'd resell later at huge profits. Jamar called with incredible news. "The judge has frozen all HOA actions pending a complete audit. And here's the best part. Those families who were forced out, they may be entitled to get their homes back." As I made breakfast, Zoe sat quietly at the kitchen table. "Is something wrong, honey?" I asked. "I just don't get it," she said, tracing the BLM letters on her shirt. "Why did Mrs. Reynolds hate her so much? Just because of a shirt?" I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. "It wasn't really about the shirt, sweetheart. Some people get scared when others stand up for what's right. They want to keep all the power to themselves. But we won, right?" she asked. I hugged her close. "We stopped them from hurting more families. That's a start." My phone buzzed with a message from Jamar. "Turn on Channel 5 now." We gathered around the TV to see Mrs. Reynolds being escorted from her house in handcuffs. The reporter explained that police had found evidence of fraud, falsified HOA documents, and even blackmail materials on other residents. As we watched, Marcus took my hand. "You know what this means for Maplewood Gardens, right?" I nodded. "They'll need a new HOA board, fair people who care about all the families here. People like you," he said with a smile. I thought about everything we'd been through, the threats, the fear, the fight. Then I looked at Zoe, proudly wearing her BLM shirt without fear.